So good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This conversation with Nurdin Farah, for me, it's the fourth conversation. We've recorded 2 conversations before with him, speaking on various issues to do with his books. And I think today we are here. Most of you know why we are here. It's that this book is now 50 years old. It was published in 1970. I wasn't born yet. Half the room wasn't born yet. Our mothers were being convinced to get us born. And there is the question of women being convinced to be mothers and wives, etc., is in the book here. Nurdin Farah will introduce himself. So I'll just ask him to actually tell you his real name, because nowadays you never know. You might be calling him Nurdin Farah, but he has another name. So Nurdin, just tell the audience your real name and your childhood name.
Well, my good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be sitting here and talking to you. This is quite a dangerous.
Yeah, just get the other mic.
Why don't I just use this? Yes. Well, in Africa, we never seem to get the mics right. Well, my mother used to call me Nur. It's only when I did something wrong that upset her that she would call me Nur El Dino, which obviously is the same sort of thing. The only thing is we put emphasis on the name. And I don't remember in Nairobi sitting in a small room and talking to as many people as I'm talking to now. Possibly people have come to find out if I'm still alive, if I'm 190 years old. And the reason is because they've been hearing the name. I can guarantee to you that I am okay, I'm healthy, and that this book was actually written 52 years ago. I was a young student. He's passing some secrets. The other thing that's very important to mention is that From a Crooked Drip is not my first novel. There were 2 novels before From a Crooked Drip. And I have no idea where the manuscripts are. I had sent the manuscript of the first novel called, at that time, it was called To Make a Deal, to my to a publishing house in America, in New York. They liked it and they asked me to revise the manuscript. And I lost interest in it. And then wrote another novel and again lost interest in it. But the one novel that kept me grounded and that made it possible for me to think that I could submit it to a publisher was From a Crooked Drip. Now, Crooked Drip has become, in a way, mythical, because when I sent it to the publishing house, the editor, James Curry, who would become my editor, wrote a letter to me. In those days there were no emails. So he wrote a letter to me and he said, "We would like to ask you one simple question. Are you a man or a woman?"
Which is why I want to ask you. Which is why I want to ask you two questions that I think you can respond. What does this book really mean to you? It's 50 years old. You say 52. So it has grandchildren, right? And then what really motivated you? Because you have a book whose subject, the lead character and the subject matter, in a way, at that time, stretched the boundaries of what would have been seen as acceptable in the society where it was set.
There were a number of other novels by African authors writing about boys growing up. And all these books became bestsellers. No one, in fact, bothered to review From a Crooked Youth when it came out. It had never been reviewed until after I published many other novels. But it has many, many stories, some of which I will have to tell you tonight. And one of the reasons why it has many stories is because it traveled by word of mouth. People telling each other, this is a book that you must read. With no reviews and no name recognition, and the fact that I was living in Mogadishu at the time, where the language, the medium of instruction in the schools was in Italian, and so on and so forth, all these things began to downplay the importance of the novel and the subject matter. Because this novel also precedes what we know today as feminism, macho feminism, it didn't help coming out at that time. One or two other fascinating stories about the fact, about my editor publishing, writing to me and asking if I was a man or a woman. Till this day, I receive letters addressed to Mrs. Farah because they think that I must be a woman. And when I had a wife, it was easier because I would give the letters to her and say, please deal with it. Now, living in an apartment alone, I don't know what to do with them. And when the novel was translated into Slovenian, a Slovenian woman who read it wrote to me a letter at that time, care of the publishing house, in which she said, "Between us women, since men will not know or understand, I want you to know," and so on and so forth.
Okay, which then leads to the question that today I'm assuming that if Ebla was alive, she would be in her 70s, right? Do you think her situation, the situation you think of creatively in the book, would be better than when she sought freedom by running away from the village to the city? Because she's running away from a marriage that is likely to happen if she stays around. Do you think her situation would be better today, still in the context in which you wrote the book?
I doubt it very much if her situation would be any better today. And the reason is because the situation of women in much of Africa and much of the world has changed very little. And it continues to be a struggle for one to be a woman and to have the life comparable, similar to that of a boy. Because of the restrictions that occur, because also in Somalia today, given the civil war that's raging, things would be different. And I'll tell you one thing in confidence. We will presume no one else is listening to us.
Let's go ahead.
I wrote rewrote the prologue of this novel 2 months ago.
2 months
There
ago?
is a different prologue that will appear in a different format. We are making a film based on From a Crooked Dream. And because of the way films work, I have decided to give it a different prologue so that you will have Ebla, who is now elderly,
In the 70s.
in her early 70s, and who now lives in Toronto, and who is telling the story of her life to a granddaughter whom her mother wants to bring back to the Horn of Africa to have her infibrillated. And she fought very, very hard to make sure that that daughter is not circumcised. And so she tells the story of her life to this granddaughter.
Since you are not listening, I'll ask, you didn't hear that, right? It was just between the two of us. I'll ask the next question. So Ebla's search in the book is really a search for her humanity. Because she's searching for individual freedom, and the way the story is constructed, the individual freedom, there's no individual freedom unless it's founded in a community, right? And so then the question arises that this search actually literally is found in the entire corpus of your writing. For me, is this a literary project? Is this something you decided that I am going to be writing about the search for humanism? The most recent book, The Dawn of South, which is North of Dawn, which is behind there, going back to Hiding in Plain Sight, going back to Crossbones, going back to Links. If you go backwards, all the way to Ebla's situation, there's a search for humanism. Is this a literary project?
Well, I did not start off thinking that I would be able to do it. Remember, I was 22 years old, a second-year university in India, and obviously dealing with every problem that a young 22-year-old person has to deal with. And I wasn't very good at, at university. And the reason is because in my second year, I had already written 2 novels by the time I come to this, From a Crooked Dream. And therefore, my attitude towards writing was one that benefited me to clarify the ideas that I might entertain, ideas that I might have. How do I go about searching in search, the quest for freedom, when I come from a country that has suffered colonialism, that has suffered conquest, that has gone through all this, and as a human being, I am not considered even to be a human being in a number of countries in Europe, America, and so on and so forth. So I wasn't looking at myself as a person. I was looking at myself as a member of humanity, negotiating all the difficulties that one is supposed to come across. And at that time, fortunately for me, I came across a play by a Norwegian author, playwright called Ibsen,
Yes.
and the play is called The Doll's House. What fascinated me at that time, at the age of 22, was to see that the principal character in the play, towards the end of the play, leaves her husband, closes the door and says, to hell with you and with everything else that you represent. And there came the opening of the novel. There is this woman who lives in a middle-class family, married, not quite happily. And if she could leave whatever comforts that she had, I thought Ebla, at the age of 18, whose hand has been given in marriage to a man who is 62 years of age, she will have no life. And therefore, she thought, it's time for me to go. And go in search of my own humanity. And the reason is because I have no life to live here.
But still, Nurdin, the question that's really disturbing about this book is this. If you read the entire corpus of early writing on feminist literature from Africa, believe you me, you will not get a mention from a crooked rib. And yet this is exactly the kind of book every feminist would walk around with and say, so the wind of the late 70s and 80s of African feminist scholarship, how did it ignore this? Which
because
then comes...
Because I was a man.
But why were you as a man writing what is really... if you've read Nawal El...
Maybe because I was pretending to be a woman.
Okay. That's really an answer. It's a profound answer, because if you read the book and you read Woman at Point Zero by Nawal El Saadawi, then you're wondering how comes a book from Egypt and a book from Somalia, two profound books about African feminism, in a way, have not really been part and parcel of the conversation on African feminism. But now you've given us an answer. The next question is, you are a transnational subject. And I don't mean it in a theoretical sense. So Nurdin claims to be a citizen of Baidoa. And Nurdin has Ethiopian relationship. Nurdin has Kenyan relationship. Today, do you say you're South African? How have your travels, how have your living elsewhere, and these elsewheres impacted your thinking and your creativity?
Well, I think it must be very important to say that if I stand up now and I stand on a piece of ground, that on which I'm standing becomes invisible to me. What I'm trying to say is that being distant from Somalia, living in India, to which I went when I was 19, enabled me to take a very concentrated look into Somalia. It enabled me to see a Somalia that I would not have seen had I continued to live in Somalia along with the members of the family, etc., etc. And therefore, distance distills. Distance makes you see better. You see? And I'm one of those who have benefited from being in exile. When I was writing the books on dictatorship against Siad Barre, and he was, threatening me with detention if I arrived in Somalia, sentenced me to death, did all kinds of terrible things, endangered my life, physically endangered my life more than once. The reason why I was able to think of all this was because I was able to think freely. If I had lived on in Somalia to write a novel called Sweet and Sour Milk, Sardines, or Close Sesame, which are about dictatorship, the first person who would come to me would be my mother. My mother would say to me, "My son, I love you. And there is nothing special about you. Why do you stick your neck out? What is it in it for you to do these dangerous things? I do not want you to die. I do not want you in prison. I want you to work at a bank, make a good salary, bring it.
Get married.
Get married."
Bring the grandchildren.
Exactly.
And
But-
what about writing books?
I am writing books, but my mother, bless her soul, understood. And do you know why? Because she was a poet. And she knew that there was a special link between her and me. Apart from the fact that she was a poet who did not produce much poetry because she had given birth to 9 children. If she had not given to 9 children, I'm quite sure she would have become a greater poet because she would have had the time to produce poetry. Instead of producing poetry, what did she do? She continued producing children. So these are the things that also makes the difference between men and women. Men, because they do not carry a baby for 9 months and then give birth to them and so on and so forth, have more time to write books than women.
The reason I asked you about the idea of the transnational is that the kind of received wisdom about Somalia and its troubles is that there is a kind of an argument that there is the problem of the countryside and the city. And remember, Ebola crosses the boundaries. And you just said crossing boundaries enables you to see the world in new and different ways. Can you speak a little bit to this question of crossing boundaries, especially for women characters in your books?
Well, if there are boundaries are to be crossed. And the boundary that she crosses, it's not the only boundary that actually exists. There are boundaries that are invisible to people. And Ebola, the first boundary that she crosses is when she wakes up that morning. And without knowing where she was going, thought to herself that she preferred her freedom of choice and living in freedom to being in servitude and in comfort. And that is the boundary that she crossed. By the time she comes to the town, she had already made up her mind that there was no going back. And by the time she moves from there to the city of Mogadishu, she is a completely different person because she is raped by the man who claims to have become her husband. And as a woman, she will have no support. Because when we're talking about search for freedom, when we're talking about being on a quest for freedom, it's allowed for men to do it. to go through this adventure, but women are not. And I'll tell you somebody else who actually loved this book and who told me how much he loved it, and then asked me a question that shocked my system. I met Chinua Achebe in 1973 in Kampala at a conference where he was going to be speaking about the English language and the African writer. And because he was the editor at the time of Heinemann African Writers series, Achebe told me how much he liked the book. And then he asked me the question, did it sell well?
Okay, what is your answer?
I was shocked because I was thinking, here's this great writer whom I'm meeting for the first time. I'm 26, 27 years of age, and I wanted him to talk to me about the value of the book, the literary value of the book. Instead, he was asking me if the book sold or did not sell.
Money matters in life, right? Now, I was asking you about the transnation and boundaries because there's a fascinating thing. If you haven't, try and find out from Google. So, the people of Somali descent are the most spread Africans on the continent. You will literally find them anywhere in any part of Africa.
And without Somalis, the continent would not function.
So keep that in your pocket and come back.
I will be able to give you many examples why without this continent, without the presence of Somalis, South Africa would not become independent. The frontline states would have suffered greatly, and the reason is because it is thanks to the long distance trucking of the Somali business people who carried food and other stuff that enabled Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and some of these frontline states to survive.
Yes. And
therefore you would need to have created Somalis for the continent to become liberated.
Okay.
We do not receive enough gratitude. We get locked up everywhere we go. But this is the point.
Well, the point is that I did not know the political end of your left-hand side, but we'll come back to that. The question I was going to ask about the specific place of Somalis is that even in the region, in East Africa, literally they straddle all the countries. So you're talking about Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan as pretty much Somaliland, right? And yet, in what you would call now the village, you understand? So you have all these people who have this massive influence out here, but in the village itself, the home, okay, which is your first love, and which is a key component of your literary works. So what is it at the heart of the home that needs to be restored for the nation and the people to kind of realize the freedom that Edla is looking for?
Well, Somalis are inward looking. Something is disturbing you. Somalis are inward looking. We usually like to think internally and process our thoughts first through the head, even though we continue talking noisily and never stop talking. There is the internal process that continues to go. Now, Ebla, and the name itself has a meaning.
Okay.
It is a person with not a stain, a stainless person, a pure, kind, lovable kind of person. Eb means shame, something to be ashamed of, someone with nothing to be ashamed of. And because she is born into a nomadic encampment, that is where the life begins. And that internal dialogue is the thing that saves her from doom. In the first or the second chapter, when she's thinking about escape, you would think of her as a philosopher, even though she's only 18 years of age. And one had to obviously consider that she realizes that by escaping, by leaving, by going, she is not only crossing borders, but she is endangering her life, and she is also, in inverted commas, brings shame on her family. Now, something that hasn't been paid much attention to is the old man who has given his granddaughter's hand in marriage to his crony, 60-year-old man. Now, what does he do? He curses her. He says, I can't remember the exact words, but he says something to the effect, may you bring, if you look at the last few words of the, if you could read it, please. Or is that the, may you bring, what does he say? No, the proverb. It must be at the bottom of that page.
Page 5.
Page 5. Does somebody have it? Can you read? May you?
Yes, it says.
Yes. Okay.
May the Lord disperse your plans, Ebla. May He make you the mother of many a bastard. May He give you hell on this earth as a reward.
That is a curse. Now, if later on the old man were told he dies as soon as he makes this curse, but if somebody had asked him about her life, the old man would have said, my curse has happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You see?
Yes.
Whereas she thinks of it as the experience through which a woman goes through. And that is the big difference. The big difference is male society in Somalia, among the men in Somalia. I have nothing good to say about them very often. And the reason is because they're the ones who create all the havoc, the war, and everything that has continued in Somalia. And the reason is because they believe that every curse they utter will become true. And we, all the others, are victims of that.
And that's the problem with the soul of the society. I mean, just the last question, really. This is a day for many. There are many who would want to know what your childhood nickname was, really, amongst your friends. So today is the day that Saint Valentine is celebrated. He was a martyr in the Roman Empire. He was actually executed. But he left the ideal of love. I have no idea why people buy roses, because if you read the history of Saint Valentine, he went to serve the sick, the wounded, those who are lonely. And I didn't know that buying a rose can actually help the sick. Your stories are also about love. Ebla does not find the kind of love that women today seek for in a man, but she kind of finds a way of loving herself.
Good,
Yeah.
because nobody loved her. And
Yes.
therefore, that's the only way. The other thing is, you see, relationships are also based on listening to one another. And when a marriage is about to collapse, or a relationship is about to collapse, you will hear one or the other party continually saying, "You're not listening to me. You're not hearing me." And the reason is because love, one of the first things about love, is to listen to each other, to approve of one another. And that approval takes many different forms. Ebla did not receive the approval of her grandfather. She did not receive the approval of the community. Why? Because as a girl, she was considered to be a commodity that could be sold in exchange for camels, in exchange for dollars, in exchange for something else. And she was also expected to be a virgin, because if she is not virgin, she brings shame on the family, and so on and so forth. And this continues till this day, and until we stop thinking of women as property, to be sold as chattel, to be sold and bought, and so on and so forth. And unless we consider their point of view and say to them, "What do you think? Where are you on this? What are your ideas?" Because we do not listen to them. Because we do not listen to them, we are all the poorer. Because we do not listen to them. And we do not respect them. We do not love them enough.
Yes, so don't just receive flowers, and don't just give flowers. Listen to your neighbor, whether you love them or not. I would like, Nurdin and I started this conversation out there. It's not going to end. In fact, part of the plans is to say, why don't we have a colloquium in August this year, a full day event in which we can harass him, we can love him, we can chastise him, we can ask him about his party membership in the 70s, etc., for a full day. So for now, I would want to exchange the mics and let those who had come to confirm if he's very old, like typical old African men, he's shaved his hair, so you'll not know really. So let's swap the mics and take this mic back there so that people may speak to you too. Thank you very much for listening. So I find this irritating, but I will irritate you by saying, be clear enough if your question or your comment, and even if you just want to say hi, take the mic and say, "I'm your cousin from this other side," and pass it on. Thank you very much. So there's a roving mic. Ask your question and then pass it on. I think we have about 15 minutes. That's what I was told. I'm sorry about that. If you extend it, I'll just pretend like my boss isn't around. I have a boss behind somewhere there in the air.
If we can open it.
Yes, you can just say who you are.
And if you say your name or something.
You can say your name so that if when Nurdin is responding, he can remember it.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. First of all, my name is Ikram from Odzana Cultural Center. The question I had is like, in your book I haven't read yet. It's my first time. So I was interested, that's why I came here. The question I had is, you said before that up to now the lifestyle of women, how they're treated, it did not change at all. The percentage that it changed is very low. These days, like the parents, they either tell the girl child, either get married to your cousin or someone from your own qabil, tribe. They say, choose one, fardu'a, farhabat, finger of
either blessing or a curse.
a blessing finger or a cast finger. They tell you to choose either of them. So does like your book also talk about using those kind of things? Is it right or wrong? And the side of tribalism too.
Well, I don't. Let me just tell you something. If you haven't read it, I suggest you make the time and read it. Let me also add the following, and that is that we Somalis are no longer following our culture, our tradition. And I would suggest that we know our tradition before we can speak about many of these things. You're a young person, and I suggest when you have the time to find a book, probably borrow it from the library if you can't afford to purchase it, and read it. And then in August, when I come back, perhaps you can ask me a question.
Okay, there's a mic.
No more questions? I was going to ask them questions if they had none.
There is some.
Yeah. My name is Elizabeth Kabwe, and I studied feminist writing, and it is so unfortunate in the 90s we did not read from a crooked reed. And like Tom said, the reason was that I think the scholars were looking for writers, feminine writers, female writers. And but what I want to ask, in your introductory remarks you talked about people referring or thinking you are female. So what I want to ask is, as you wrote about Ebla, did it take you any special efforts to think like an 18-year-old? Did it, or is it just because you're a human being and you observe that you're able to write from a woman, a young girl's point of view?
Thank you. Well, I usually say this mic doesn't seem to work. Why did you give me a dead mic? Is it working?
Yes.
I'm not speaking properly. Let me say that I usually claim, and I have no evidence to prove it, but I claim that when I am writing, I move into a mood that takes me from the mood in which I am daily and on a personal basis, and then move into a zone that is not accessible to me when I'm not writing. In other words, I become a changed person. Something moves me that makes me write things that I had no idea I would write. If I go to the computer, or if I take my pen because everything I write in longhand first. Everything seems to flow through my arm, in through the pen, and I manage to write these things. If you show me the same things a day later, I would not remember I was the one who wrote down. So it is possible, as we say, every person has a feminine side and a masculine side. It's therefore possible that when I wrote From a Crooked Rib, the female side of my persona came to dominate, and therefore I expressed the feminine side of me. The novel that follows this novel is called A Naked Needle, and it is about a male chauvinist. And when the novel came out, it became the Bible of male chauvinists. So much loved by male chauvinists that I withdrew it from publication. And if you have the slightest doubts about the things that I'm telling you, you can ask a publisher, he's still a publisher called James Curry, or read his book. He wrote about African literature, and he will tell you that all the things that I'm telling you, first, that he wrote to me asking if I was a man or a woman, he did mention it in that book, and so on and so forth. So maybe that is the reason why I was able to write From a Crooked Rib.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ado Khalil Jubat. I am one of your fan. I almost read all of your books. And I travel from Garissa to come to attend this forum. And as a Somali person, when I read your books, I get angry. But I love the way you write it. One of these should ask you, most of your books, you always base women in emancipation in terms of economical, social, when she goes out of her country. Does you think your book is encouraging Somali immigration? Those who are crossing the rivers every day. Because you create that somebody cannot become somebody in Somalia. Because I was even reading your last book, and Welio, she have to be encouraged to move from Mogadishu. She come in Kenya, she do part of prostitution. Then she have to move to Norway, whereby the entire family, the boy and the girl, and become somebody in their society. Until when he has to come back because she could not accept the changes happening there because she was too, she was too fundamental. Secondly, sometimes I doubt, because you encourage some cultures which are not common among Somalis. For example, the hiding side play. I one time wrote a commentary in Nation. After I read it, you encourage always, you glorify taking beer. You glorify people not praying. You say this when they came, there were the daughter and the Welio's daughter and the boy. They were enclosed and they were for praying every time. But when I talk about prayer, it's just like you downplay. So sometimes I doubt which side you stand in faith. And lastly, whenever you mention Kenya, you always associate with corruption. When Welio came, and you have to go to Mombasa to acquire national identity, we don't deny. We don't deny this corruption in Kenya. But all your books, when they are passing through, I acknowledge that you always mention Kenya, but when they pass, always, if they are looking for passport, documents, you must always include some part of corruption. Have you experienced Is it no, I'm not denying. I'm not denying. No, I'm a critic. I'm asking. Is it a personal thing which happened to you that you are always thinking about any service rendered by Kenya government is always corruption related? Thank you very much.
Well, I have never, ever applied for papers in Kenya. Maybe in my second life. Corruption in Kenya, does corruption exist in Kenya? Ask any Kenyan. I am not a Kenyan. I can only write what people have told me. And people have spoken about corruption in Kenya. Small corruption, big corruption, they exist. With regard to Somalis doing better outside than inside the country, I should know better because I've done well better outside Somalia. I'm now working on a book, and the title of the book, I can tell you the title of the book, in secret. The title of the book is Crabs in a Bucket. Do you know what that particular title means? I'll tell you what it means. If you have 5 crabs in a bucket, and one of the crabs manages to get out a little, the others will pull him down. Another one will try to get out, and then they pull it down. Somalis usually do that to one another. It's true that, you know, whenever somebody raises their head, and especially if you're among Somali communities, you know. And let me tell you another story that's also very funny. When I first arrived in Somalia, as a young man with a published novel, with a wife at that time, she was from India. We were, you know, at university together. Somali said, he published a book. Gee, no, this is not possible. The woman has written it for him. She and I were married, and then we parted company. I published another book without her. I published another one without her. Another one. And then they said, well, maybe he wrote the first one too. So there is this absence of trust. We do not think that one of us is good enough to do this. Now think of Mo Farah, who now runs for Britain. If he were in Somalia, living in Somalia, do you think he would have done as well as he has done in Britain? Let's tell each other the truth. Somalis usually prosper, do better when they are outside other crabs, because that crab will pull the other crabs down. About the faith, my name says it all, Nurdin. It's a blessed name. But I also think that praying is a personal matter. You love your child if you have one, or children. Yes. But unless they pray, you cannot pray on their behalf. Do you see what I'm saying? And therefore, when Wilia, and had two children. One is called Naeem, the other one is called Safi. They're taken to Norway, their children, they're impressed. The boy says, everything that I do, I'm not allowed. Why can't I live like a child, enjoy myself, without continually referring to the faith? I'm not the child. This is a child who thinks like that. So what you need to do is to go to that child and talk to him. Don't come and talk to me. Thank you.
Here is another question. Hello, good evening. My name is Hodman Muhammad. Hodman. Very old name, yeah, Hodman Muhammad. Okay, it's a little bit fascinating. It's like you're advocating for women. I've never heard your book, but a friend of mine here shared with me.
I haven't read them either.
Yeah, can I continue, please?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've never heard your book, but one of my friends here shared with me one page. It's like, wow, very fascinating. Thank you, this is amazing. But my question here is, I want to take you back to your book. And what was the main reason, and what were you targeting? What was the worries at that time made you to talk about wrote this book? And also, I never had or read the story about Ebola in your book. But what was your worries at that time? What made you? What would you wanted to change from the society at that time? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you know, like everybody else, I had a mother, I have sisters, I have in-laws, I have lots and lots of people I know. And if I observe my society, that's the Somali society, or African society, or Muslim society, the societies to which I belong, and comment on them, then the idea of my books are just based on observations that I've made when I looked and studied and analyzed the lives of people. When, after publishing the book, I went to a small town in Somalia called Beledweyne. I was sitting down and having a cup of tea with people, and a woman turned up. And she said, her name is Ebla, and that I am actually telling her story. I asked her if she and I had ever met. And she said no, we had never met. So I said to her, why are you telling me that I had written your story? Because she said she wanted half of the royalty. This is the story that is very common in the Somali-speaking world. You could be in Garissa, you would find an Ebla, you could be in Djibouti, you could be in Jigjiga, you could be in all these places. And I can also tell you something that will give you comfort, and that is the gentleman from Garissa who was kind enough to have flown, Ado, who was kind enough to have flown from Garissa. He told me not so pleasant reception that he gave to some of the books. And I can tell you that similar stories, people would usually say, We like what you're doing, but we don't like how you do it. And I usually say to younger people, I know he looks much younger than I am, and I say to them, well, if you're very unhappy with some of the things that I do, the way I do them, why don't you do them? It's very easy. If I can do it, everybody else can do it, with patience. And I'm hoping that there will be. I just met a young person who gave me a collection of her poems. It gives me the greatest joy when I see Somalis writing things down, writing books, committing themselves to the idea of writing and reading. And therefore, I'm hoping that in this hall full of young people, I'm hoping that there will be at least 5-6 persons who will write a book. I can tell you, it's the easiest thing to do, is to write. Thank you very much.
Hi Nurdin, my name is Ikra, and I have one question.
I can't see you, but can you see me?
No, I can't.
Well, yeah, okay.
Ikra.
Ikra birabbika.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of yours. I adore you in every
Very
sense.
kind, very kind.
Yeah, and my question is based on an article that Tom did last month. And I know you, from your writing, you've personalized everything. It's not from what Tom said. You're not, writing books from, a creative point of view, but you personalize it as, it's from your journey and, the things that you have gone through. And the title said that you are, in search of peace with your new novel. And it got me thinking, what does peace mean to you, and what is it exactly that you are looking for?
Did I write the article?
No, he didn't.
That was the editor.
Well, in that case, he can answer it. He can answer it. He wrote it, I didn't.
No, Nurdin is supposed to answer that. He's flown all the way to come here and answer questions, and then now he's over the fence. No way. Answer this.
The question has been answered.
No.
No, it hasn't.
What does peace mean to you?
Well, peace means exchange of love, exchange of agreement, communication, allowing people the freedom to think what they like, how they like it. Peace, to me, also means that a Somali woman would dress like a Somali woman without looking like someone from Afghanistan. Peace, to me, looks that the guntino is worn again and not considered to be something terrible. Peace, to me, means to be proud of being Somali and not to think ill of yourself. These are what peace means to me. I grew up in a place where the guntino was worn on a daily basis, and now it's become haram because some sheikh, some person said you can't do this because al-awra. The Somali woman wearing guntino is not awra. God created the human being to feel comfortable in their own body, in their own person, and then you must also trust that our women know what is good for them, and they will do what is good for them. We are not from Saudi Arabia, where if a man and a woman sit in a room together, they think they're doing something bad. No, we lived in a place, and I lived in Mogadishu, when you didn't have to worry about some of these things, because every person has dignity, has self, has integrity, and that integrity must be trusted. I don't want morality police to be moving around and saying, this man has looked at this woman, lock him up. No. Thank you very much.
Good evening, guys. My name is Ibrahim Mohammed. I'm a medical student. I have a title, and up to now I am not getting it very well.
Have you read it? Have you read it?
Yes. I think in your third or fourth page, it's written that women are from a crook rib, and if you try to straighten it, it gets broken, right? So in that one, you wrote it's a Somali, traditional Somali proverb. And after reading that, I saw it's an authentic hadith in the Sahih al-Bukhari wal Muslim. So my question was,
Could you say it in Arabic?
I read it in English, and it's just the same.
No, Hadith Bukhari. If you say Hadith Bukhari, then give me the verse, the exact. Does anybody in the hall know the original, traditional from Bukhari? Do you? Does anyone? Because you you saying to me that this is not a Somali proverb, but that the Prophet said it.
Okay, my point is...
No. Let's agree on that one first. Let's agree on that one. I stand corrected.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, I will accept that I'm wrong. But I'm saying to you that I disagree with you because it isn't Bukhari. It isn't Hadith.
Okay, it's a hadith, but usually Somalis and Arabs usually live together, and their cultures are usually intermingled. So Somalis take a hadith as a culture. So differentiating the two usually becomes a bit challenging. So I want to tell you it's a hadith.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
There was a hand here.
Yes.
My name is Adam.
Adam.
I am from
And where is
Somalia.
Howard then?
I'm from Somalia. Thank you very much. I want to clarify a little bit about the hadith
Yes.
and the proverb.
Yes.
It's both.
Okay.
It's hadith and the Somali proverb.
Okay.
Hadith on its own way, Somali proverb.
What is it in the Arabic version?
You try it.
What is it in the Arabic version?
I just read it like him. I don't have on this book, I have a little history I want to share with everybody.
Okay.
It's early 80s.
In the early
Don't take it against me.
Please.
This is important.
Respect.
It's in early 80s.
Yes.
I'm not that old, by the way. My maternal uncle had it. My maternal uncle had the book
Yes.
with him, with
Yes.
other books,
Yes.
science and other novels.
Yes.
And he saw me looking at them, through them, and he told me, don't read this one.
Why?
And I'm in high school.
Yes.
He told me, don't read this one. I said, you're reading it? What is the problem? He said, okay, if you read, don't internalize. So I made sure to read it, and I made sure to understand it. And on another dividend, it encouraged me to perfect my English, which I'm still grappling with. So I had that history. Another thing is that when I was told, I read that Nurdin Farah wrote this book when he was 22 years old. I was like, were these years like 12 months? The way we know it today, or the years were counted in like 50 months.
In other words, am I telling a lie about my...
No, I'm not saying that. I do believe you.
I'm a Somali.
I believe you, and I want to brag about the background from Al to Juba,
Yes.
and I always said, Nurdin came from Baidoa. Even
Yes.
if he was 7 years old, he could have written wonders.
Yes.
When you look at the 22 years old today, forget about writing a book of this magnitude. They can't write their names. 22 years old. That brings the question to you, like, and to everybody, like, we were different, basically. From your generation, my generation was thinking we were a little different than you. Lower in quality, but way better than what we have today.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Let me tell you, if it's any comfort to you, sir, that my daughter, at the age of 12, wrote a short story that gave her, she put the short story, she entered a competition in story writing. We're living in Cape Town, and she was given the prize out of 35 entrants, and she was 12 years old. And at the age of 17, she wrote a novel. And last night, she telephoned me here in Nairobi, and she told me that she is now seriously, she's a medical student, she's now taking creative writing course for the first time and would like to go back to writing the novel that she wrote at the age of 17. The reason why she never continued to write novels is because my former wife, her mother, said to her, if you continue writing books, you will become like your father. So stop doing it. And therefore, I say to her that she did well stopping writing.
Okay, we have just two questions. There's a hand here and there's a hand here. You will wind up. Please, like.
Shall I say?
The rent is due, so standards.
Thank you.
We got to escape before the landlord comes, right?
Okay, thank you. My name is Khadar Mahmoud. I'm very happy today to be in this room and met with one of our most precious writers. During your 20s age, what was the most difficulties that you have met?
So shall I take the second question and then deal with them both?
Pass the mic this way. Here. Yes.
My name is Zarina Patel.
We can't hear you, Zarina.
Nurdin Farah, I am really amazed that you wrote this book at a time when word feminism didn't even exist in East Africa. Really amazed. I have two questions. One is the practice of infibulation. Can you tell us what is its real origins and why and how it ever began? And the other one is to do with language. When you wrote the book, what language did you write it in? And do you support Gugi's theory that we should be writing in our vernacular languages?
Natural, did you say?
Vernacular.
Vernacular.
Yeah. You know that. You know what Gugi says.
Yeah, but the correct
All right. Okay.
correct term is not vernacular,
Natural.
but language.
Right.
He doesn't say vernacular because vernacular is a lower grade of language. One has to be very careful about this. Now let me answer the first question first. The first question from Khadar Mahmoud. Now, I thought I had written it down. I didn't, and the question was.
The one is challenges. One is the challenges of writing.
Yeah. the challenges that I met, well, first of all, I will tell you something quite small and simple, and that is, at the age of 18, 19, I was given a scholarship to go to America. I was to go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. But I did not want to go to America, which is very bizarre insofar as other people are concerned, because I said instead of going to America, I want to go to India and study Indian philosophy, because I felt closer to Indian culture than I did to American culture. And the Americans who gave me the scholarship at the age of 19, because by that time I had published a couple of short stories, they said to me, Mr. Farah, if you go to India, you will never ever become a writer. So I said, leave that to the future, to the American, who would eventually, in 3-4 years' time, would be walking down the street in London when he sees Crooked Rip being advertised. And so when we met, he and I, in another 10-20 years, because my sister went to that university, where he was now professor, he, apologized and said he was mistaken, because he read the book and thought it was very good. And therefore, he changed his mind about India being a worse place than America for a writer, in other words. So what are my challenges at the age of 21, 22? My challenges were, I had a scholarship. And whether I continued receiving the monthly stipend depended on the exams that I passed. And if I continued thinking about the novel the whole night, and I was being made to read Virginia Woolf and Shakespeare and all these people, and I continued thinking, why would I be reading Virginia Woolf when I can write my own Virginia Woolf? And so the challenge was to continue doing my degree as I continued writing. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge because I could throw all these books away and write instead of reading somebody else's books, somebody else's writings. And then eventually I would meet, some very famous writer like Anita Desai. Yes. I met her at the age of, I was 18, 19 when I met her, because I was interested in writing. She invited me to tea, we talked. And do you believe it, that she and I did not meet until 32 years later, when she was speaking in a hall in London, and I sat way in the back, raised my hand and asked a question. She did not see me. I did not say my name. She said, that must be Nurdin Farah. Because she registered the voice when I was 18, 19, and people continue telling me I don't change. So my voice doesn't change either. Now that answers the question. The challenge was big, because I continued telling myself, why would I read someone else when I can, do my own writing?
Two questions.
Really, the two questions. One was infibulation. The culture of female circumcision or female genital mutilation. I don't like this because it just sounds like some biology class, zoology biology class. Infibulation. The basis is economic. The basis of The basis of it is economic. If a girl is virgin, you can sell it for a lot more than if she has been, in inverted commas, used. You know, like used goods, damaged goods. It's all a matter of economic. Second-hand material, second-hand pair of shoes cost less. Are you following the logic of it? And it's a male-oriented society. And it is not in the Quran. It is not, it has nothing to do with Islam. And the trouble is that it causes psychological damage to the girl child at the age of 7, 8. It causes terrible pain when they get married. It causes more pain when they give birth. And therefore, pain becomes a second name to women, Somali women. And since it is not in the Quran, we continue telling the wadads, the sheikhs, the ulama, as you call them, we continue telling them, please tell them. It is not in the Quran. It's not in the hadith. It is a tradition. And that tradition, the basis of the tradition is money. And one day, in private, I can tell you lots and lots of, jokes and other things about the reason why it's become important. Now, Ngugi is my friend, but he and Ngugi became famous as a writer in English. And then he started writing in Kikuyu, which is more specifically a group of Kenyans. And therefore, when and if he writes in Kikuyu, unless he translates it into English, many other Kenyans who do not speak Kikuyu will feel isolated. And the question is, this grandstanding? Is this politics? Is this ethnicity promotion? A great number of things. Nobody can decide what a writer must write in. If you write an excellent book in Kalenjin, a novel in Kalenjin, eventually it will be translated into English, into French, into other languages. And in my view, the thing that matters is not the language in which you write it, but the ideas contained in the book that you write. That is more important than the language in which you write it. The question that you asked me also, did you write your first novel in English? I wrote my first novel in English. And do you know the place English takes in the languages which I speak? English was my fourth language. I learned 3 other languages before I learned a word of English. And then I learned 2, 3 other languages after that. And I have written in Italian, and I've written in Arabic. And I've written in Somali too. So what I'm trying to say to you is that I would write, when the ideas come, I would write in any language I'm able to write in. It does not matter what language it is. What matters, and what is much more important than anything else, are the ideas that I portray. And therefore, the fact that I wrote From a Crooked Rib in English, doesn't matter. It's neither here nor there. It's been translated into English. It's called Farah in Somali. It has been translated into a great number of other languages. But the ideas which make the novel, in my view, because I'm the one who wrote it, which makes it special is because of the ideas it contains. 50 years ago, I wrote it. And I hope it will live for another 50 years. And that we will continue enjoying it in different languages. And I thank you very much for your attention. And thank you very much for being... And thanks to Professor Tom Diambo, who's been very, very kind and very patient. Thanks to Ubah, who has invited me. I knew Ubah when she was 2.5 years old. And I'm most highly impressed that someone whom I knew at the age of two, or even earlier, as a father reminds me, is now big enough to start a bookstore in Nairobi. And we pray that this bookstore becomes a success. That, I hope that I'll come back and speak here. At least I can promise that every time I'm here, I will definitely visit. And I thank all of you for coming. And all the best. I will sign the books when... Oh, you're coming right here. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. My name is Uba and I'm the curator of Cheche Books, which is officially launching today. Thanks to Nurdin and Farah, thank you so much for coming. Thank you Tom Odiambo, thank you Aleo Kisem, thank you Suhail, and everyone else who came. We're open. You can follow us at Cheche Books 1. That's it. Thank you.
Hello. If you bought a book, or you carried your own copy, or you're just about to buy, Nurdin is going to go out. Just near the cafe, so he'll be there. He can sign books. He is going to sign books for the next until the books are finished, right? So thank you very much, as Uba said. God bless. I hope to see you in August.
Before everyone leaves, we're running out of books, but if you sign up and leave your email and the number of books that you want in the next 2 weeks, they should be here. So we're running out of books. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a photograph of you.
How are you? I've got my book, I brought you a copy. About 70. And we've got a picture of you from 1990. Here we go.
We have a picture of you from 89.
Yeah.
everybody.